Hello from Hanover. My name is Thomas Danne. I'm a pediatrician and clinician working at the Diabetes Center auf der Bult. We are joining here together to talk to something that is very close to my heart, the idea of time in range. And we want to do this kind of as an interlocution between the clinician and the physician. And I'm here together with Kelly Close, who's much more than just a patient. As you know, she's an advocate and she's doing so much. And without further ado, over to you, Kelly, to San Francisco. How are you, Kelly, today?
Oh, I'm very well, thank you, Thomas, and I hope that your family and your patients and your colleagues are all doing as well as possible. We are so grateful to be coming to you, and it's really nice that you've asked for a patient perspective, for me to bring some patient perspectives with me. I've had diabetes almost 35 years now, and over that time, so many things has happened, so much progress. For the last 20 years, I've worked in diabetes full time, and we put together a newsletter at diatribe.org, and we send out to about 250,000 patients every week the things that are going on. And Thomas, you know that I love watching your colleagues, all of the things that you all have done in research and keeping people up to date with that. We also send our work out to about 10,000 healthcare leaders every day through Closer Look. And also we are in community every quarter. Our sister organization is DQ&A, and we watch about 18,000 patients and ask them for their opinions on different things happening in diabetes. That's in about almost 10 countries now. So it's an honor for me to be here getting to speak with you. And one of the things I'm really excited about right now is time in range. So not everybody is so familiar with this concept, but this has been enabled by continuous glucose monitoring. And you have been so much a part of the standards that have been set, and how we have really started to think about this field has been so enabling for patients. So thank you for all of this work on this front, helping us do as well as possible physically, emotionally, physiologically.
Yeah, well, Kelly, I mean, I'm really amazed what you have done in the past many years. If I look back 30 years, I started as a pediatrician and I went to my first diabetes congress, and I still remember that when the issue of glycated hemoglobin came up, I said, well, come on, that's probably very boring. That's chemistry. No need for me as a clinician to understand that. And somehow I feel that this issue of time and range right now is very much in the same stage for many practitioners out there. They feel, well, CGM is complicated, it's expensive, it's not exact yet. And there is a lot of reservation around there. And I hope very much with this program together with you, we will be able to, well, kind of alleviate those feelings a little bit and make people confident that time and range is really here to stay and is important. What's your opinion on that, Kelly?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Thomas. I totally agree with you that it's really an evolution. I mean, I've been going to scientific conferences since the early 1990s, and it was a really big deal when DCCT came out, and that really validated A1C. That was a standing ovation in Las Vegas. That was in 1993. And we have to remember that A1C itself wasn't even necessarily that trusted way back in the day, right? Now that we can see time in range, it really helps contextualize A1C, right? And it helps us see, maybe I have an A1C that is on the lower side, but maybe that's driven by a lot of hypoglycemia. And now all we have to do is, look at our smartphones, and most of the world has access to smartphones now, and we can see this is 75% time in range. My doctor just looks at it. All she has to do is look at it, and she says, what's your GMI? 6.8. That's kind of an average A1C. So I think it's really helping us understand the diabetes, just the diabetes experiences of so many people with diabetes. You're right that not everybody maybe accepts it quite yet. Back in the 90s, CGM was a gleam in someone's eye, right? But all of the progress that has been made on accuracy and reliability and convenience, it'll catch up. I think that people will start to learn much more about it. And for us as patients, it's so gratifying.
Yeah, well, I think your thoughts are shared by the millions out there with the day-to-day dealings they have with managing their diabetes. We have to realize that so much is driven by the A1C, and the A1C for many patients is not so helpful because it's just a number. It doesn't tell you anything about glycemic variability. It doesn't tell you anything about hypoglycemia. And so, as you have pointed out, I mean, these new metrics, and in particularly time in range and time below range, are really helping patients much more to make the right decisions on their own, as well as together with their physician, like you really pointed out. So I think the technology is expanding our toolbox basically, and it allows really the instant feedback. So if I tell a patient, let's try a different basal insulin, they can actually have a direct feedback what this is doing to their glycemic control, because they can see whether this green bar of time in range is expanding, is getting larger, or maybe even is getting smaller, or the red area showing time below range is increasing. So immediately a patient is able to see whether we are on the right track or we have to get back together and think what can be done to improve the situation. Is that your experience as well, Kelly?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Thomas. Even talking to you right now, it reminds me of talking to my own doctor, because she would say, okay, this is your last A1C. And of course, in the pandemic, it's very rare. I've only had one A1C taken, but she would say, let's look at your 14-day numbers. Okay, your 14-day numbers are this 75% time in range, but I really want you to be working at that average. And I'm looking at hypoglycemia. I love this. She'd say it's less than 1%. This is very different from back in the day. You know, in my first 12 years having diabetes, I was in the emergency room 24 times. And I so got used to looking, closing my eyes, opening my eyes, seeing here again. Now, with the value of the arrows, I know when I'm getting into trouble, and it just helps me. It's my companion here. But she would look at the numbers, and she used to say to me, you're the worst patient in my practice for hypoglycemia, and that narrative has really changed. Now she'll look at it and say, your hypoglycemia is looking good. Let's work at the highs. I'd like to see that average. For minimals, the average, we want to keep it between 3 and 10. In the US, it's 70 to 180. She would say that's an average of 145. I'd like to see that a little bit lower, but it lets me have much more of a conversation with her. And she is really a hero. And so I feel like it's allowing patients and their doctors and, caregivers and nurses to work together much better.
Yeah, I think you're pointing out a very important piece of information here, because this is really empowering patients and diabetes teams alike. In the days before the pandemic, it was my feeling very often the patients came to the clinic, it was uploaded there, and the doctor gave advice. Now that they were unable to come to the clinic, they actually uploaded their data at home to be able to talk to me. And by doing so, they actually interacted much more. They looked at the data and they saw what was happening. And so when we had our video consultation, they said, listen, I think I have a problem in the evening because there are too many lows in the evening, and then I'll eat something and I'm high over the whole night, and we need to do something there. And so it really becomes a conversation and much more a discussion than just a one-sided thing. So I really think for us clinicians, it really helps a lot because it empowers also the patients and the whole diabetes team. This goes for the diabetes educators, the nurses, just the same. So it really makes a big difference. I think the diabetes management is evolving from here. Don't you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I just love hearing about your whole practice and the clinic. When I do go in, when we start seeing people again, in the offices, even talking to people everywhere, like, what's your time in range? Where are you? Which piece are you working on? It's about every 5% is an hour more time in range. So even if I'm going from 40% to 45%, I'm getting an hour more happiness. I'm getting an hour more predictability and productivity and all of that. I think the empowerment is a really important piece as well, Thomas, and it just also allows others around you to be more part of the conversation.
Yeah, and I think, another part is having targets and having goals. And as you say, 5% change in time and range is clinically relevant. And I was very surprised when we came together in this international consensus with physicians and advocates from all over the world. The first thing that kind of came up is that we said, listen, why should we have different goals for people with type 1 diabetes, for people with type 2 diabetes, for children? Why, if we are able to reach with the most advanced type of therapy in studies, approximately 70% time in range, then this should be the goal. Of course, this goal needs to be related to the situation of the patient, and you have to individualize those goals. But to have goals, to have targets, I think is a very important piece of diabetes management, and to agree on those targets, I think, was a very, very important step. Both having a target for the time in range as well as a time below range, because you don't want to increase the time in range and then have lots of hypoglycemia on the other hand. I think it was extremely helpful to have this consensus report, understanding what are our goals, how do we want to visualize that we're using the ambulatory glucose profile. We don't look too much at the spaghetti curves or single values anymore. We really have now very nice metrics to look at that. Is that also your experience, Kelly?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and from a patient perspective, it's so amazing just be able to look and say, okay, for the last 2 days, I can say 0% very high. Okay, that's not the case when I look for 14 days where we're looking at 3%. But you can kind of work on things on a daily basis. And the empowerment part that you're talking about is a really big deal. I think also, historically, I at the beginning of my time being diabetic was terrified of going blind, and I was terrified of going on dialysis. And I know now if that happens, I will be able to handle it. And I also know that there are so many ways to prevent it. And so working on time in range, that's something that I can do today to be working toward eye health, and to be working toward heart health, and to be working toward kidney health. Do you know what I mean? It's not so much about being scared. By the way, diatribe.org/EYE, we've been able to write about so many more things that are associated with our health and staying well. And Thomas, that's what your whole life is about, right?
Absolutely. But I think, what we also need to do is, on the patient side, to approach those who have kind of a hesitancy to go into the CGM field, into the cloud-based sharing of data. I mean, there are reservations, there are limitations, people don't understand how to upload the data, they might not have a computer available. So there are also barriers that we need to address on both sides, actually, of the monitor, because also for the physicians, for the diabetes teams, very often they say, I don't have the time to upload data, I don't have the time to look at the different softwares, to update it all the time. So there are still barriers, and we need to broaden the understanding about among the physicians as well as the patients, that they really see the advantages, why it is so important, and that it's not that complicated. It's not as difficult as it seems in the end if you get it done. Don't you agree, Kelly?
Yeah, I completely, I am with you the whole way here. I'm wondering, can you tell us more about even like what is average time in range in Germany, for example, or what have been the reactions to the consensus guidelines? And thank you again. I know you really pulled for patients being there and being part of setting that consensus. We're so grateful.
Well, to be honest, I think the patients are going to make the difference in the long run, because the patients can tell those people who do not believe in time and range right now how it really changed their daily life. And that's much more convincing than when I, as a physician, talk to the same thing. I think the patients, with their examples, with their how it really changed, that they say, well, you know, my doctor gave me an advice. I could immediately see my 14-day average was better. This was a good advice, or I had to call him again because it simply didn't work out. My time below range increased. We had to change something. So I think those are the particular stories that will convince those who do not believe it right now. We are just getting registry data together to see, you know, how much time and range is in the normal patients. But it's very interesting that there are already publications out there that during the COVID epidemic, some of the patients who stayed home, who had time to look at their profiles, although, you know, it really was crazy for everyone because the whole daily schedule changed. Of course, you weren't able to exercise as much. Food was around all the time. But they still were able to improve their time and range because they had the time to look after their profiles, and they had instant feedback how things were working. So I'm looking forward to see what registries will tell us, you know, how on the one hand the CGM metrics help in difficult situations like in the pandemic right now. So we will in the future understand that much better.
I can't wait to see you at more podiums talking about time in range. What I've also noticed in going to scientific conferences, even virtually, people ask in the Q&A, what is the time in range? What was the ending time in range? And it's so powerful hearing again, every time it's 5% more. That's an hour more time we get to spend. You know, and I wanted to just comment also on what you said for time during the pandemic. I mean, we hope that everyone is doing as well as possible, and their families and colleagues. It has given people, probably everyone, even though there is much more stress, of course, going on for many patients, it has given everyone probably a little bit less distraction, more stress, but less distraction. And so I know that for many people over here in the US, there has been more of a push towards spending time exercising, even if it is things in your house and things like that, or things immediately around you, and being able to see, wow, the perspective of what it takes, 10,000 steps, what that means for the impact of time in range, what getting more sleep means if you're lucky enough to have that. And obviously food is fundamental, and interventions of, you know, medicine are absolutely fundamental. And the time in range, seeing your 14 days and then seeing what you should do, it's very, very powerful. So again, thank you for those guidelines. They've really come alive.
Well, they're available now in many different languages. You can go to the Diabetes Care website and you will see this consensus report in different languages. But still, to be honest, I mean, there's still a long way to go, because to some of my colleagues, when I talk about time and range, they say, well, where is the proof that time and range is really better than the A1C, that it really matters? Where is the DCCT trial for time and range, that really this metric is meaningful in the long run for the outcomes, for the cardiovascular mortality and morbidity? And to be honest, I don't believe it will ever be possible to run something like the DCCT trial with the endpoint of time and range, because technology is changing so quickly that I don't really believe that it would even be feasible to do a DCCT with time and range again. And I don't think it's really necessary. But obviously, I mean, also regulators are much more likely now to look at time and range also as a parameter for clinical trials, because if you have a new drug and it improves your time and range, it might be just as meaningful as an improvement in time in A1C. So I guess, you know, we still have to work a little bit to convince some of the people who are very much A1C centric. What's your feeling on that?
one thing is with that, Thomas, I mean, actually today, could you really run a DCCT or UKPDS? It would be unethical to put someone, in the place of, don't have good, have negative or weaker time in range. I don't think you could do that ethically, but of course, so we're really looking forward to seeing, as you say, all of the outcomes in registries in many parts of Europe. So we will be looking for those. And also, we know there absolutely is the data that there is less hypoglycemia. There's less severe hypoglycemia. And today, really everyone on insulin or anyone who is taking any therapies that cause hypoglycemia, they need CGM to keep them safe. And there should never at this stage be anyone who has to go to the emergency room for severe hypoglycemia. This is what we need to do for our world. Not only that, once we have the data that comes from CGM, again, we can see the next steps. How we might change medicine, how we might change food, how we might change exercise, even how we might change our own mindsets. So I think it has been really valuable from that perspective, and from a research perspective. I think just being able to see the differences in severe hypoglycemia and also in DKA will really be illuminating.
But let me provocate you a little bit, Kelly. I mean, obviously, yes, hypoglycemia, that's something that you might be able to avoid with your CGM data. But I really see the future. CGM is really a biofeedback tool. Why wouldn't somebody who has prediabetes wouldn't be interested what it does to the glucose levels when he's walking the dog instead of sitting in front of the television? Or somebody, on an oral therapy, or somebody with a basal only. All of these people will profit from such a tool, in my mind. And I could even see that, people without diabetes in the future would be very interested to see how their time and range is doing, and also moving from one type of therapy to the next, how it should be intensified. I don't believe the A1C is such a good tool to do that. I think probably time and range would be, and time below range would be much more helpful in these intersections where you would go in one or the other direction of a new therapy. Would you agree to that, or am I going too far here?
No, I love it. I mean, we want people with diabetes to be as well and safe as possible, right? So this is physically well, this is emotionally well, and obviously pre-diabetes, if you could stave off diabetes for as long as possible, that would be fantastic. That's actually even relevant for type 1 as well as for type 2. But I think as well, this biofeedback tool that you talk about, exactly, we might make choices to eat this or eat that, or put ourselves in celebratory situations. Moderation is everything. And then this is the impact, and the fact that you can see that right away. And I think it has been amazing on a behavior change perspective. We watch this amazing behavioral health guru here. He's just down the road at Stanford. His name is BJ Fogg. And he said on changing behavior, it's all about two things. And this is what you do as endocrinologists and as clinicians helping people with diabetes. You help people do what they want to do, and you help people feel successful. And CGM and time in range has been amazing on those two fronts.
Yeah, I'm really thrilled when I look into social media and I see how patients are sharing, for example, pictures of their food or their glycemic control at the same time and saying, this was a FNIR day, a flat, narrow in range. That's what I want to have. And I achieved this by eating this type of breakfast, by exercising this way, by walking the dog instead of watching television, all these things. And I think they're learning by example. And it's amazing how this community is getting together to learn together how to use these tools in the best possible way to achieve those flat, narrow in-range days. And you're doing a fantastic job, of course, with Diatribe and really how to support people feeling more successful with their diabetes treatment by using those tools.
Thank you, and we can completely do it. I think that it's also been amazing, as part of this global health pandemic. I think all of the doctors and nurses responded very quickly to just say, we need to move this virtual. And what we have been able to see with us being able to talk to our doctors and show them pictures and say, what do you think? There are more conversations. I know DQ&A just surveyed over 4,500 people with diabetes, asked them about their experiences with telehealth, and over 70% said how very successful they thought it was. Successful, very successful. And us being able to use this tool and show you the data, it's all about using the data and the technology to lead toward that success. So thank you for that, Thomas. We have come a long way, and I really would love if clinicians who aren't using time in range might think about it. You can use it also with blood glucose monitoring. It's harder. We want to move everyone toward CGM, toward not needing finger sticks, and we will be able to see, much better long-term outcomes like Thomas is talking about. But you can do this even with blood glucose monitoring. And just a way to think about it, time in range, it just makes us see the possibility. And that's so nice, because we have to remember, like, the 24/7 of diabetes is still, there's a lot of hard pieces about it. But joining together with our doctors and nurses has been really, really inspiring to me personally.
I think if something new comes up like time in range, very often it scares people, and it takes some time to adjust. And it's probably not wise to say, the A1C, you can forget about the A1C. The A1C is a gold standard, it's a laboratory method, it's very well established. And yes, the time might come someday that the GMI, the glucose management indicator, replaces the A1C, but right now I think both of them are complementary. There is a link you can use for a population analysis. The A1C is great. You can see what is the average in our clinic, are we improving or not, in relating that to long-term outcomes. So I think we really need both at this time, and it's important to realize that. But on the other hand, to make people appreciate the value of time in range, of course, we also have to make it attractive, not only to the patients, but also to the payers and to the physicians, that this is a new parameter that is very, very valuable. And I think it's nice that we have the general acceptance more and more of CGM, but very often people say, well, is this really worth all the money? Isn't that too expensive? In our country, in our national health system, we don't have CGM. Maybe we will not have it for some time. And then I tell them, well, look, if a good technology is working, people will adapt it. And if more and more people will adapt it, prices will go down. Just think of cell phones. For example, even in relatively poor countries, most people have cell phones. And so it's my belief that in the not too distant future, I think most people with diabetes will want to have a CGM, and maybe it will become just as affordable as for many people around the world cell phones are right now. So, but what we really need is to join forces. I think patients and physicians need to work together to do this change, to make those who are not convinced yet understand what the benefit of time and range and the new metrics for CGM are, and how it really improves the day-to-day management. So, Kelly, I think you still have a lot to do to convince a lot of people out there. How do you want to do that?
We do have a lot to do in this global community of stakeholders coming together. But it has been really inspiring. I just want to say we see all of the doctors and nurses and all of your offices working really hard. We see it, and we know that you're not reimbursed yet for the time. I think a lot of work needs to be done on that front so that we can see we're investing more shorter term for better outcomes longer term. We know right now the world is spending too much money on diabetes and it doesn't yet have the outcomes. you have made such a difference for people individually. And if the ecosystem can work together so that at a community level and at a population level, we are really changing outcomes, that will be when we are really feeling more successful as a community. I think in terms of, even getting beyond reimbursement, I mean, what I would love to ask, if doctors, if you can ask, please try it, please experiment with this, and please try asking your patients to come to their next appointment, again, whether it is virtual or real, but to have the data downloaded. And I'm hoping that your offices can help them see how to do that if they don't know. The startup phase, there's more to do, but then being able to show and tell and be in conversation and in community with your doctor, it's so powerful. So that's what I'd love to ask. That's the one thing I'm looking for and hoping for.
Well, I can just tell you from our team, what I thought was so great with this evolving concept of time and range and CGM, and particularly with now developing a virtual diabetes clinic during the pandemic, was teamwork. Because obviously we have diabetes educators who know the ins and outs of all the different devices. We have young physicians who are very well with updating the software, with understanding passwords, getting around glitches in the control. And then the older physicians, sometimes if they see an ambulatory glucose profile, they can really pinpoint where the problem is. And so if you get this teamwork working together, I think this is what really helps also in the diabetes teams to get this done. So that really on both sides of the monitor, it's teamwork, like in the families. So the 14-year-olds are sometimes better in uploading data and finding the ways how to install the software, and then the parents can motivate them when they see the ambulatory glucose profiles at home, and they can tell them what to do. So really, I think it's teamwork on both sides of the monitor, which is made possible through this technology. And I really hope that we can bring this across to many people, many more people, because otherwise, I think they're losing out on a very good thing. Kelly, your thoughts on that?
No, absolutely, Thomas. I mean, what I love about the work that you're doing in your practice, and you have always shown us this as a researcher, health is multifaceted, diabetes is multifaceted. And so the work that we're able to do together on time and range, there is so many pieces of it. We have, with your inspiration, built diatribe.org/TIR. So anyone can go and look at those targets. I know in Spain, I think it's TER, but our URL, diatribe.org/TIR. And just to be able to know this is a path, this is a road, we're on it, we're making big progress. And just thank you to everybody for all of your work helping all of the patients and their caregivers and their families. And so to you, thank you to everyone for tuning in with us today. We have loved being able to spend time with you, and what an honor to be with you, so many providers and patients on your diabetes journeys. Over and out from San Francisco.
Bye-bye from Hanover.